Hi everyone. Today markets tried to go higher. They tried to get to that trend line and they ended up giving it all back and then falling negative on the day. Momentum turning to bearish, RSI continuing to sell off here. Is this a short-term pullback? Is this going to turn into a more medium-term pullback? Let's take a look at it on the charts today. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. Moving over to fear and greed, this stepped down substantially here to a 56. We were at a 57 yesterday, but a week ago we were at a 63. You can see this continues to roll to the downside, signaling that markets are likely to see a little bit of a pullback. Still extreme greed on the momentum despite the pullback here today. Strength rolling down, breadth rolling down, put call ratio still very, very low at a 0.61. Again, that's as low as we've seen it. We'll see if that continues to hold there. Volatility rolling up. We talked about that yesterday. Safe haven demand cratering here, continuing to be in fear. Junk bonds rallying, continuing to be in fear. So definitely some cracks moving on this indicator, and markets really haven't gone with it quite yet. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see initial jobless claims coming in a little bit hot, otherwise nothing crazy. Fed balance sheet selling off about 9 billion. Continuing jobless claims actually came in a little better than expectations. And then for tomorrow, obviously we have all of that unemployment data, non-farm payrolls, participation rate, all of this stuff going to be very, very interesting here tomorrow. Markets started to roll down in anticipation of this data, so that's a little bit concerning. We'll see how this plays out in tomorrow's session, but markets might be sensing some weakness here in the jobs data. Moving over to Max Pain, you can see it's sitting at 601, stock price 606, call wall still 605. My guess is we drift below that for the market close tomorrow. Total options not a ton, put call ratio pretty low there at 1.5. Should give markets a little bit of room to the downside. How much remains to be seen. I think that's going to be dictated by the unemployment data. Moving over to the SPY charts here on the daily, you can see we were down 0.16, nothing crazy, $1 there. It's falling a little bit after hours, about 50 cents. Again, still nothing crazy, but the step towards bearish momentum, definitely concerning. You can see we were overbought yesterday to 70.77, pulled back below that 70 line at a 68.85, and it does seem a little bit eerily similar to this kind of structure here. See if we can find some levels. So I found this trend line here. It's basically the parallel of this line right off the highs here. Doesn't quite mark this high. Really, it's just a single point, not a super powerful trend line, something where you would have a couple of touches, a couple of reactions, but it's something, it's interesting. If you did use the multiple touch method, then you would be here, and then you'd be looking for a hold of this trend line. Kind of depends on your preference. I would say this is probably a little bit stronger. You can see it was a level here, push through, continuation higher, retest, held, pushed down once it broke. Now we're here waiting to see if that level is going to break or not. Basically right at it on the close. After hours are kind of below it already. I don't know, kind of a janky trend line, but something to consider. Gives you something to work with in this zone because we're at all-time highs and it's always hard to find something worthwhile. And then looking at it here on the hourly chart, you can see you had a topping pattern, tried to go higher, tried to hit the trend line, could not. Closed below candle, closed below all the short-term EMAs. 55 is still holding, continuing to sell off after hours. It's a little extended to the downside. 55 obviously is going to be your critical level there at 605.50. If this breaks down, probably going to see a little bit more selling. So far, this has held really well throughout this push. Got above it here on the 20th of November, retested, held that level, continuation. So if the 55 breaks, that's going to be a change in structure. Watching it closely at 605.50. Moving over to the SPY charts here on the Tasty charts, you can see we hit that upper level, overthrew it a little bit, kind of looks like a big wick rejection. You can see some buying coming in at the ATR trailing stop. We did come a little bit lower here, close to that 55 EMA on the hourly. On this chart, you can see we're already at it. 605.83. The low of that candle was 605.88, so pretty much right on top of the 55 hourly. You can see we're in bearish conditions here, so with that push down, we took out the ATR trailing stop. So if you're trading off of this hourly trailing stop, you probably got stopped out already, which means change in structure, rallies should be met with a little bit of selling. Again, 55 is the critical level. We'll wait to see if that goes. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, just to give you some context, you can see we're below the 8, so it is one of these kind of short-term pullbacks at least. 21 EMA would be what I'm looking for at 605.06, so still a little bit more downside potential there. Current price is 606.09, So about another dollar lower to touch that. Still very much bullish conditions here on the 4-hour chart, which I think is a little bit more reliable. The hourly can be a little bit more choppy. So the 4-hour trailing stop is sitting at 603.86. Moving over to the NASDAQ, down about 0.25%, still well above all these trend structures here. Again, I don't really have any trend lines to work with. Let's see if we can find something. You could maybe say this is something to work with, but it's really not at that level, so we're coming up a little bit short. If you wanted to say this is a trend line here and we are not hitting that trend line, that's showing some weakness potentially. Again, not a super great trend line. Definitely something to watch though. That's currently sitting up at 530. Gives you an intermediate level before that 543 area. And then looking at the short time frames, you can see again, just like on the SPY, tried to break out, couldn't do it, fell a little bit. Probably going to see a retest of that 21 EMA on the hourly, which is sitting at 522.47. So if you get the breakdown, rally up, retest, continuation lower, that's going to be terrible. Momentum, bearish, but starting to find a little bit of strength at the end of the after hour session. You can see SMA on the RSI much lower, looking for a retest there, continuation lower. If you do get the bounce here, you can see we broke below the 50 line. This is overall still an uptrend. So if you get a pullback here, break below the 50, continuation above that 50, and then a resumption of this rally, it could be a good opportunity. Kind of a weird setup, not one that I tend to use very often, but it is a setup that people do use. Want to see it hold that 50 line, get back above it. You can see a kind of continuation style move here. So an example of that would be right here. So you got a breakdown, broke below the 50 here. Zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. You had some choppy action, broke below the 50, got back above the 50 here, held the test of the 50 continuation run, and that kind of led to this uptrend here. So it's not a terrible setup, can actually happen, but right now, to me, this looks a little bit more like a rejection than a continuation style run, especially with that 2 candles up, big candle down, saw selling volume on the last candle of the day. We're at those critical levels. We've been talking about it, and it does look a little bit bearish. Moving over to the Tasty charts here, you can see we did get below that 8 EMA at 521.61. Current price, 521.36, so just barely below it there. And then looking at this hourly, you can see we're in bearish conditions, just like we saw on the SPY charts. Hit that upper band, overthrew it a little bit, pulled back, sideways consolidation, dipped below that level. Again, at this point, I would expect some sellers to come in and try to push this a little bit further down. Your 55 EMA is still in there though at 519.99, right at that lowest ATR band, 520.13, which is really close. Obviously, this is the hourly chart, so it's a short time frame, but it's really tight. We'll see if we end up finding support in there. If it does, you could actually look for a bigger continuation style run. But just looking at how extended this is over the short time frame, it does feel like we're due for a pretty substantial pullback. Next level below the 55 would be that 89, and that's at 517.73. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow. The Russell had a pretty rough day, down 1.17%. The Dow was down about 0.5%, continuing to reject off of this trend line here. We said this zone was going to be pretty resistive, and sure enough, it has broken down. Momentum fading, RSI fading. Russell, critical zone here. My level, 238. Touch the level. We'll see if it ends up holding or not. 21 is just below it there, 236.99. At this point, you would expect some more continuation. I'm being patient. It is at a level. It's been a run. You can see just how extended we are, but I still like this to go higher over the medium term. I think seasonality is in its favor. It's just at a critical point here, 238.02, waiting to see what happens in this zone here. You got VWAP just below it, 236.04, but realistically, everything says this should go lower. Moving over to Unity just for a second, you can see it did get the candle break continuation. It was pretty choppy in the mid-session here. You can see first candle was up, hoping that we were just going to kind of get this continuation, but it immediately pulled back to the 21. Sideways chop. I got stopped out in here. Did not get back in on this up candle. I wasn't watching it, but big up candle here, big volume. The interesting thing is that big wick rejection on the last candle here with some selling volume starting to fade a little bit, but it does look very good still. Holding in the after hours, probably going to see this push up into that 30 area still. I still like it. I just got stopped out here and did not get back into that position, unfortunately. So probably should have moved this down at least to the 2618 area. That's what ended up holding the VWAP area here. I just didn't move my level. So a little bit of bad trading, a little bit of a wrong level, but either way, still looks good. Moving over to ULTA Beauty, they had earnings. During the session, they really didn't do much, pulled back slightly, but you got earnings here today, and that was massive. They did very, very well, up 12.2%, pushed right to that next level in the after hours. You had to be in it already if you were in it. Hopefully this worked out for you. We were looking for the break at 404.99. If you're watching the after hours, maybe you could have bought shares in there, but realistically, you had to be in it already. Big break, made most of the move we were looking for. Probably going to continue a little bit more, but I'd be cautious at these levels. You can see big up moves, consolidations, big pullbacks. Could be volatile at this point. You had to be in it, but it did end up doing what we thought it would. Moving over to Microsoft and Apple. Apple was up 0.01, really no change. Stepped down on momentum, not great there. Probably going to pull back a little bit more. Then looking at Microsoft, did what we thought, pushed right to the level, 440.72, broke the level, closed above it. So now you're looking for a continuation style run. So you have a big consolidation, pushed through these levels, pushed through the resistance areas. Now this looks like a continuation, probably back up to those previous highs. Microsoft looking like a pretty solid trade here over the next couple days. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA. Tesla continued its run, pushed through the level, and then right to my 369.33 level, closed above it just by a few pennies, but pretty much right on top of it. Momentum swinging, RSI swinging. We talked about that step towards bullish yesterday. Got the continuation on it here today. Probably going to push back to those all-time highs here on Tesla, which your next level is 384. The all-time highs are in here around 411. So we'll see how it plays out. Right now, still looks very, very good. Continuation run, up 3%. And then looking at NVIDIA, not as good, right? So we dojied on the day, slightly bearish, 0.06. I still like this here. Momentum still says it could go a little bit further. Still want to see the test of the 149 level. It is above it as long as 144.42 holds. Should be a bullish condition. Again, as long as that 55 holds as well, that's still a bullish trend. You can see pullback, held the 21 rally, pulled back a little deeper, held the 55, rallied out. So based on that, you should expect some higher pushes here. If it tops out at 149, that's probably all she wrote. Probably going to see a little bit more sells. So see how it plays out. Right now, support is holding, should be bullish. Moving over to Amazon and Alphabet, you can see Amazon up 1.1%, momentum bullish, RSI still bullish. We said it was a very close to overbought conditions, and it almost got there, just a little bit short, continues to look good there. And then looking at Alphabet, down 1% on the day, rejected the 21 EMA. Now that it closed below it, interesting to see it here. Again, this is really choppy, pretty hard to determine what this is going to do. RSI says we're above the SMA. We should hold the retest continuation, but price structure says high, lower high for me. I would be looking for this to pull back a little bit more from here. Realistically, I don't have a clear idea on where this is going, and I would probably stay out of it until I had a better idea. So I'd be patient on Alphabet. Doesn't really look clear in either direction. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, both of these did fine. 0.4 to the upside, held this level. So we did break it yesterday, gap to it, rallied here today. Momentum still fading, RSI still good. Decent volume there as well. I would say this probably goes a little bit higher tomorrow. And then looking at discretionaries, still pushing toward this trend in my opinion, up in the 230 area, momentum bullish, still super overbought at a 76.24, but can stay overbought for a little bit. It's been very aggressive to the upside. Probably going to go a little bit more. Moving over to industrials and transports, you can see both of these falling pretty aggressively, 1.2 and 1.8% respectively. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. We're not really seeing this across markets quite yet, but you can see there definitely are some sectors that are breaking down. You can see VWAP 21 breaking. Those already broke here yesterday, continuation style move. It's out of this trend structure here. On transports, you can see it's been in it for a while. Clear breakdown of that lowest level, headed towards the 55 there at 70.85. See how this plays out. Industrials looks a little better. You could argue it's still within the structure, but transports signaling some breakdowns to come. Moving over to Mara and RIOT, both of these tried to gap higher on the move overnight and then sold off as Bitcoin rejected. So these continued lower here. Momentum very bearish. Same here, step towards bearish on RIOT, back into this consolidation. This looks like another wick rejection for me. These are probably going to head lower. RSI breaking down on both of them, big volume on both of those, so they might be done for a little bit. They looked good yesterday, did get a slight continuation, but markets rejected. You do have to play the markets you have. Still very much an uptrend, but starting to show rejection at these key levels. Moving over to 20 and 50-day breadth, both of these cratering here, breaking through a bunch of levels on 20-day back below the 51.75 level. We are right at the lows from this previous low. Momentum very bearish, RSI very bearish. We did get the continuation lower. Talked about how we might bounce on these levels yesterday. Didn't do it, gapped lower and fell. Now you can see it here on the 50-day as well, continuing lower. We were already through these levels yesterday, broke that last 200, momentum heading towards bearish. Seems like these have a little bit more in it. Realistically could head to the 52.81 level. If we do, that might show a change in structure here where you have a higher high, but then you would have a double bottom potentially in here. Then you would look for a lower high continuation lower here. So I would wait to see what this looks like, but it is signaling some bearishness to come. And again, markets really haven't gone with it quite yet. Moving over to the dollar, for me, the only reason that equities are not falling more aggressively is because the dollar has been showing weakness. We got a big down day, 0.59. Market's already closed for the dollar, but we are starting to see just a very hesitant bounce here. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish. I would still expect this to continue to sell. If the dollar keeps selling, maybe equities continue to hold up a little better, but for now, it's showing just a little bit of up move here into the open. And finishing up with volatility, last thing I want to highlight is the up move yesterday, up move here today, continuing to show support in this area. It seems like we're going to get at least a little bit of a bounce. How much of a bounce remains to be seen, but I would guess we at least hit the 21 just like we did here. Pulled back, rallied up, hit the 21. Are we going to push through there and then get into these higher levels around 17.45, maybe all the way up into the 20s? That remains to be seen, but the VIX is showing some potential moves to the upside, and it continues to do so here into the Friday. Moving over to my accounts, I'm back to basically my base positions here. Russell, still that 240 call for tomorrow. It's at about 50% profit, another $75 on it. The shares were down $300 on the day. Lost most of that, but not all of it. Makes sense here. And then looking at the Qs, didn't change my positions here either. These covered calls are back to even. They're in a little bit of a profit now, which means there's still $4.72 here and then another $4.14 here. So still plenty of protection, about a 1% protection on each of those over the next week. Obviously, we're going to see some volatility with the unemployment data. Honestly, I'm probably a little bit too bullish going into that. I think it's going to be a negative catalyst, and we're probably going to see some sell-offs with the kind of price action that we saw today, but we'll be patient on it. We'll see how it plays out in tomorrow's session. Hopefully I can play some defense if we do get some major selling, and really that's what I'm concerned about. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the markets. What do you think markets are going to do into the unemployment data? What's your thesis? Otherwise, definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.